Hello. Um, Lecture 16. My laptop keeps crashing and preparing these asynchronous videos. Takes a lot of memory to make these things, even though it's a MacBook 16-inch with supposedly a graphics card. Um, it is tough. Here we go. We're talking about making the diodes that go into the city, making the bubbles, making what did cities represent for places of ideas and information, places of spectacle, but also places in which this dyad was formed, which in its 6,000-year-old development, certain tribespeople could come off of the plains from their hunting and gathering out of the woods, enter into these spectacle centers to which there were jobs, there were ideas, there was stimulation, there was entertainment, but there was also an ability to mix your gene pool, to serve as a mecca of ideas, but also a way to diversify the population. Um, we'll talk briefly about, as brief as this machine lets me, the ideas that go into kind of primitive game theory, sort of constructing the dyad, the bubbles. Talk about American film noir as reflecting rites of passage past, but reluctantly so. The Beat Generation, great comics such as Lenny Bruce is in his book How to Insult People. Comically talks about a non-acceptance of this rite of passage to which you shall enter into this dyadic relationship. A lot of the great American film noir is based on kind of an articulation of this non-acceptance of the dyad coming out of the horrors, not just of World War II, but of total economic collapse. Great series, Babylon Berlin, talks about how a society like Germany's got up to that place with liberal left wing, libertarian left wing acceptance of communism, homosexuality, different lifestyles, drug use, polyamory, all these things that then the German fascists of the 30s came down and accepted, adopted, imposed a type of Ponzi scheme fascism to which the German people would sacrifice in to get the dividends of belonging out of. So we see on a boots on the ground scale, we see a non-acceptance of these rites of passages and the shallowness of dividends. I mentioned before the great literature of American and Vietnamese Vietnam War era literature by men and women, Vietnamese and Americans, Koreans, Australians, of what exactly the horrors were that they went through in this Cold War proxy war, what was really the function to put another generation like World War II through a rite of passage, making men fulfill their function as soldiers, society's general non-acceptance of the dividends. They returned and were jeered and not respected in the way that they were built up to be accepted in this large aspect. But we see elements of this counterculture going through society, pretty much formed in cities. New York in the late 40s, 50s, we talked about Jack Kerouac on the road, adopting again the migratory aspects of the tribes coming off the plain, the trip across the country many times, the whole continent as a tabula rasa. Nightmare Alley, don't remember. Kiss Me Deadly is an important film about the Cold War, deals with spies, deals with kind of a Byronic, sexist hero Mike Hammer, who's irresistible to women. Read acceptance of the dyad, to get the Levittown house to breed, to do the things and not remain a bachelor his whole life, commit. Reminiscent of North by Northwest by Hitchcock. Um, uh, Cary Grant as an infantilized adolescent male, womanizing, drinking, not accepting the challenges placed by this form of both McCarthyism and communism in a democratic society with typical Hitchcockian, Freudian heavy-handedness through it. Pulp Fiction, of course, was a neo-noir dealing with 90s sensibilities. Maltese Falcon, again, the global society coming in to affect the dyad, the idea that the detective, the watcher, the flaneur, the voyeur is somehow the anti-hero. He doesn't act, he disassembles. He looks for culpability in a very amoral way, coming out of Raymond Chandler and the other great Dashiell Hammett, the other great writers. Humphrey Bogart is seen as the main anti-hero, the flaneur, the detective, male flaneur as detective coming out of a war situation, having seen it all and wanting to see more crimes to sort of fit these pieces together. Gilda, interesting movie about an alpha woman who goes with her boyfriend to Argentina, read a paradise, a place outside of the West, to exercise their greatest dividends, their intelligence, their attractiveness, and falling into the same traps as they would in North America. He must win Gilda back, who is coveted by wealthy individuals, and they go through their typical dyadic cisgender sort of um, uh, uh, challenges. Shawshank Redemption is kind of a playing on that, the femme fatale. As Camille Paglia says, this is not a pathetic character. It's the character, a female character, well in charge of her own sense of power through sexuality, power through a determination of her own fate. Reed coming out of the factory works to Rosie the Riveter and all of those women who got a taste of life outside the invisible labor within the nuclear household. Big Sleep, again, playing off of the flaneur detective, the adolescent infantilized male, unwilling to make the final movement toward one woman, one dyad, one house, one life, to accept the dividends of fighting the war, surviving Normandy, and so forth. Raymond Chandler, Sweet Smell of Success, is a very, very toxic wonderful examination of the toxic places of business, the cutthroat, the hyper Machiavellianism, and borders on psychosis, a study of psychosis. Burt Lancaster, Tony Curtis, again breaking up the dyad, the challenge with the dyad. The Big Heat, again out of Chandler, I think. The German expressionists coming out of Weimar Germany went to Hollywood. Both Jews and Gentiles went to Hollywood and kind of reworked these themes of the 20s out of Germany losing the war, World War I. White Heat, Out of the Past, amazing film. Also dealing with the femme fatale. Robert Mitchum is kind of the everyman, the Midwestern guy who is not so naive as much as hindered by his own cynicism. Again, coming from the horrors of the Depression, World War II, 1947. You see a time of uncertainty and grasping the dividends of what they had to do. Touch of Evil, uh, uh, set in the border of Mexico, United States, dealing with Orson Welles, shot this 58, dealing with these notions of accepting the call to contract. Not Charlton Heston plays a Mexican, um, kind of miscast, but still has its place. The Lonely Place. Third Man, amazing film, starring Orson Welles and Joseph Cotten in post-war Vienna, dealing almost exclusively with this game theory of zero-sum, prisoner's dilemma. Orson Welles is a psychotic profiteer, war profiteer, selling tainted penicillin to kids who need it, thus, maiming and killing them. Joseph Cotten, his old friend, goes to seek him out. He's supposedly dead. Harry Reams, is it? Amazing use of the landscape cinematography to talk about this game theory and a type of profiteering, psychotic profiteering, which is also a counterculture we find after the Depression and World War II, coming out of this, a devastated, cataclysmic city. Vienna is still chewed up when they filmed this. Amazing film, highly. It was Carol Reed was the director. Sunset Boulevard, amazing against William Holden, Billy Wilder, a German emigre, dealing with this notion of the woman, the femme fatale as a aging fertility goddess to which she found her fame on the screen. William Holden, by accident, becomes her lover, and the kind of Shakespearean unnaturalness of this younger man not accepting his call to contract, where eventually in the film he does find a younger woman. We assume he's on his way to Leviton with that one, and kind of the conflict experienced in Gloria Swanson's brilliant portrayal of the former film star not accepting her decline because the illusion of the screen has taken over her. William Holden, of course, gets it in the back by her and falls in the swimming pool and narrates the story as a dead man, which is very interesting. The commentary on the whole society. We are dead if we get crushed under the gears of the contract, of the return from the war contract. Honorable mentions, I want to just say They Live by Night is Double Indemnity, Fred McMurray. Very famous film about the betrayal by femme fatale, unwilling to accept her rabbit hole in one direction, seeks another man out. The kind of Mexican standoff in this game theory between men and women accepting the call for contract is an aspect of the counterculture, which these cities were built. They Live by Night is an interesting story. Fairleigh Granger is a young criminal leaving jail with after a bank robbery. He's the driver. The other two men are seasoned killers, criminals, know what they're doing. He doesn't quite know what he's doing. He's a young man. He met them in prison, escaped, and then he meets the farm girl, and he decides to head to Leviton that way. But sort of the notion that he was illegitimate. This was an illegitimate approach to the cisgender Leviton narrative. Travels with them all the way along on their evasion of the law. She gets pregnant, and they have to decide to, what do they do when, through a class struggle or his struggle to get rid of his criminal status, what do they do when they want to enter into this cisgender Levittown, for lack of better words, narrative. Brilliant film. So let's get back to our study of game theory. I think I have enough time here. And we study categories of social behavior: selfish, cooperative, spiteful, altruism. Always favorable. Men, women pitted against each other to form the dyad, the bubble within the cities. Time immemorial. How do you reproduce a population? How do you reproduce a population that's no longer agrarian, but living in cities? What do cataclysms like the Third Man, the bombing of Vienna, the devastation of COVID, how do we come out of selfish, cooperative, spiteful, altruistic behaviors? Interesting aspects I noticed out of COVID, certainly amongst friends, that many long-term relationships, even marriages, are disintegrating on the re-entry out of COVID. It's the collapse of this contract, this narrative, proximity, sense of release. I don't know what the symptoms are, but this is within this dyad, this bubble. We're talking about architectural bubbles also. Where do you go to live and dwell with someone else, the other? Either in the city, you choose to dwell with someone in the city, or outside of it in an agrarian suburban setting. How does that affect the counterculture, which might have been more libertarian, might have been more left-wing, might have been more libertarian liberal, right-wing, might have spoken about cosmopolitan sensibilities, might have been gay, might have been LGBT, might have been polyamorous, kind of the non-acceptance of the post-World War II call to contract in this specific game behavior here. And from this, I think I'm rolling along. We'll stop this and continue.